The Inca, of course, put their best stonework in the city of Cuzco, which is located in the highlands. Cuzco was the capital of the Inca. According to one of the chroniclers, written this is after contact and conquest, it was said in the chronicles that the Inca, under Pachacuti, who's responsible for really transforming the city and transforming the Inca into an empire, that he had the city designed in the shape of a puma, and that this was done because the puma was intended to represent strength and power, and certainly it's a pretty impressive cat. I have three images of the outline of the city of Cuzco. There are two rivers that outline the body of the puma, and if you come down here to my annotated diagram, you're going to see the tip of the tail of the puma, and that is where two of the rivers join or come together and give us Tinku. The main belly of the puma right here would be the central plaza. The genitals of the puma, according to this diagram, would be the coracancha, which we're going to take a look at. And the head of the puma, which is located right here, is Sacsayhuaman, which we're going to look at right now. Okay, this is a very fun fact. The problem is we aren't absolutely certain that this is true. It is the only Andean city in the world that was crafted in the shape of an animal, if in fact this is true. So I give you three diagrams showing us the puma, and I leave it to you if you want to believe the city actually was created as a puma or not. And I have for you to observe a real puma in the upper left. At the head of the puma, we have Sacsayhuaman, and that is figure 172 in our textbook. You will note as you look at my text on the slide that I have given you three separate ways of spelling Sacsayhuaman. There is no general agreement about the spelling. The one with the figure number is the way in which our textbook author is using it. The top one is the one I'm just used to using. Spell it any way you would like. Sacsayhuaman is visibly present even today, essentially above the city of Cuzco, and we do think that it served as a fortress. Perhaps that's its primary purpose. In addition, and you can see in the lower right all of these walls, these great fortified walls, but you can also see the footprint, and that's really all that's left of interior structures that we think might have served for purposes of storage, as well as probably for military purposes, if this in fact is a fortress, but also there were ritual and perhaps palatial associated to the Inca and his role as a leader of Cusco and of the empire. We aren't quite sure the purpose of what the buildings themselves served, so we usually say fortress plus ritual and administrative purposes. We don't have the complete construction of the site left, and the reason for that is in 1537, the Spanish, who had then successfully conquered the city, certainly, and the Inca, began to take this monument apart to reuse the limestone blocks to build the cathedral, the major cathedral within the city of Cuzco. What's left of Sacsayhuaman, though, gives us a pretty good idea of what it was like back in the day. It was built to be visible, for one thing, above the city, and it was built with humongous stones. The stones could weigh somewhere, we're estimating between the individual stones, between 100 and 120 tons. And those stones could stand up to 13 feet. So the construction of this monument was amazing. It required intense labor, and it is estimated to have taken over 50 years to build this. It is also believed to be, at least in part, defensive. It regarded the Inca capital on its most vulnerable side. This was a region where we had flat land in the northern portion of the city. The rest of the city had more natural protections in terms of geography and the landscape. So, according to tradition, we believe that Pachacuti decided to create and design and create and build Sacsayhuaman as a defensive monument. The zigzag walls, in fact, would be effective in helping Inca warriors to protect the site so that it would increase their ability to defend themselves and to defend the city against assault from invading forces. This is also a stellar example of Inca stonework. The zigzag walls cast shadows, so we have strong contrasts of light versus dark, not just with the beveled edges versus the surface of the stones, but also with each projecting portion of the monumental walls that were intended to defend the Inca against invaders. It also has certainly authority associated with Inca rule and with Inca power. But in addition to that, it is practical and it is also elegant. This is the slide that you have in your textbook, and it's actually an absolutely fabulous picture, so I'm glad you have it. It makes it very clear that the shadows that are cast by the zigzagging walls echo the light versus dark that falls on the mountains, so that the Inca are being sensitive to well, first of all, the respect that we have for the mountains, which are divine, which are the homes of the gods also, but in addition to that, in echoing the shape of the mountains behind, and even down to echoing the light versus dark that hits those mountains. This is an overview so you can get a little bit of a sense of the scale of this. Today, this is a tourist destination, and you see groups of people who are visiting Sacsayhuaman, and it might give you a little bit of sense of the incredible endeavor to create this and the scale that the Inca were building on. And it's all out of stone, so it also gives us a reminder that the Inca had an incredible reverence for stone. This is ground level as we're going from projection to projection along the wall, and I'd like to stop us for just a second. This is the iconic shape of Inca architecture that allows you immediately to know that you're looking at something that was designed by the Inca, and it is the trapezoid. The trapezoidal door as well as the trapezoidal niche become symbolic emblems of Inca construction. What's a trapezoid? It is a rectangle that's wider at one end. So we have usually here, we can see the base of the door. This is the wider section. The top is the smaller part of the rectangular form. This is a fully formed trapezoidal door, and it does include the lintel stone, or the capstone essentially, that's on the top of this. This design was particularly effective in a region where earthquakes were prevalent, but it also served the purpose of becoming the symbol of the power and presence of the Inca. So everywhere that they go, whether it is stonework or adobe built in the pattern of stonework, the trapezoid is going to be used as a door, and it's also going to be used as niches. That means along the coast as well, where perhaps earthquakes would not be as significant a problem as they were definitely in the highlands. What you're seeing is something very much akin to what the Romans did. The Romans built with a single architectural style. They used it throughout their vast empire. For them, it was the Roman arch. For the Inca, it's the trapezoid. This is figure 170 in our textbook. It is referred to as the Inca throne, and that is in quotes because we don't actually know how it was used. It was elevated a little bit above the remains of Sacsayhuaman today. It has been suggested that the Inca ruler or king, Sapa Inca, may have come here to sit and review the troops as they were practicing, or perhaps to participate from a distance in festivals, to oversee the festivals. Maybe, maybe not. It's also equally possible that this was simply an offering space quite possibly for Pachamama. Pachamama is Mother Earth, and on each of those flat surfaces, an offering could have been left. That actually, to me, suggests the most likely use of this. However, we're going to have to keep an open mind. What I would like you again to see is that it is typical of the way in which the Inca handle stonework. The carving is embedded in the landscape. The form is shaped, but also not completely. It is not broken away from the living rock. In other words, it's the Inca forming something, but not too far. In this particular case, it does resemble some of the terracing that the Inca will do along the mountainsides also. It is formed again with strong contrasts of light versus dark, and that is created particularly if we go right here along the stepped regions, which break at very crisp edges at 90-degree angles. So it's very bold in terms of its shape and also in terms of the light versus dark reflection. It is totally characteristic of the Inca in terms of its reverence for the landscape, the way in which Inca creations are embedded in the landscape, and the way that stone is held in high regard, high enough to allow it to maintain its own voice after creation.